Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The union representing Canada Postal Workers is looking over the framework of a deal by Canada Post to try and reach a new negotiated agreement. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau blasted the NDP, saying the party should be more supportive of the $250 checks being sent out to millions of Canadians. And recent stats from Alberta Health says HIV rates across Alberta have nearly doubled since 2019.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Canada Post has presented the union representing some 55,000 striking postal workers with a framework to reach negotiated agreements. Officials with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers say they're reviewing the document. They say at quick glance, the framework does not appear to take into account the Labour Minister's comments about the agreement needing to be ratifiable. Federal Labour Minister Steve McKinnon suspended mediation last week and spoke to both sides on Sunday, saying mediation would only resume if the mediator had clear evidence both sides have modified their positions. Now, in a social media post, McKinnon said there's been no such evidence to date. Still, with the postal strike, the U.S. Postal Service has now suspended accepting any mail headed to Canada. The move comes as Canadians also hold off mailing cards and gifts during the busy Christmas holiday shopping season during the work stoppage. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau blasted Jagmeet Singh and the federal NDP over not supporting his plan to send around 18 million working Canadians a $250 rebate. The NDP says the fund should go to seniors and people who are unable to work instead of just those who are working. Trudeau took aim at the NDP, criticizing them for not backing the plan when they're supposedly the party of workers.
Seeing hardworking Canadians who get up, go to work every day, and make our economy and our communities successful, and recognizing them specifically that might not be benefiting from other programs and showing that we see them, that's what this is all about. So to see the NDP, which was supposedly the party of workers, turn its back on hardworking Canadians and say, no, we shouldn't be delivering this check unless we expand it massively, is not recognizing working Canadians for the challenges they're facing.
The Alberta government says it is eliminating the photo radar cash cow. Officials say photo radar will be taken down in areas that specifically generate revenue and do not offer traffic safety benefits. Transport Minister Devin Durishan says as of April 1st of next year, ticketing on numbered provincial highways will end as photo radar will be restricted to school, playground, and construction zones. Intersection safety devices will also be restricted to red light enforcement only, ending the speed on green light ticketing function.
Be clear, our government has zero tolerance for dangerous or reckless driving. Traditional enforcement has always been, and always will be, important to keep our roads and communities safe. These changes ensure that enforcement focuses on where it matters most, protecting lives and enhancing safety on our roads. This is a historic day for Alberta drivers as we turn up the heat, we fire up the grill, and say goodbye to the photo radar.
Now, Alberta's opposition leader, Naheed Nenshi, says he was disappointed with Minister Devin Durishan's comments. He says the money that will be lost due to the changes in photo radar will now fall on the backs of the municipalities. Nenshi says that could lead to property tax increases and impact police budgets across Alberta.
But what was really interesting today is the minister's answers to the two most critical questions. The first question is, will this decrease highway safety? We already have terrible rates of highway collisions and injuries in Alberta, and he didn't know. In fact, he didn't care. He said, well, this really doesn't matter when it comes to safety. That's not my point, which is kind of a shocking thing to say. And the second point is that whether you think it's a cash cow or not, the money does go to fund police services. And so when he was asked, how are you going to make up the money that's funding the police? He said, well, the municipalities, it's up to them. So basically, he has caused an increase to people's property taxes or a cut to police budgets.
Town officials in Taber have decided to not look into becoming a city, but instead remain as the town of Taber. Officials say after listening to public feedback, they decided to keep their town status. Taber Mayor Andrew Prokop says around 2,000 people participated in the survey, and most wanted Taber to simply remain a town to keep that small town feel.
it was actually about a 70-30% split against Hell to go to the city status. And that was the initial survey. And then we had 4 different coffee with councils over the last 3 months. And it was pretty much the same, very similar, with about 70% against going to the city status. So with that information, it wasn't even the numbers so much, it was the comments that went with the rationale not to go to city status, and the desire to remain with that small town feel and the tradition attached to that, and everything goes with that, and or the potential negatives that a city structure might bring, whether it's infrastructure or crime rates attached to that, or other negatives attached to that city status just doesn't seem attractive, and part of that is the desire to remain with that attraction for the small town feel.
Now, the town of Taber, which has a population of just over 10,000, will be celebrating its 120th anniversary of becoming a town in 2025. Restoration work is underway on the historic Roxy Theatre in Coleman, Alberta. It's one of only 3 Quonset-style theatres remaining in our country. Built in 1948, it came from the U.S. Army, which had surplus huts following the Second World War, and many were converted into movie theatres.
140 of them were converted into what they say is a Quonset-style theater. This is one of them. Today there's only 20 remaining in North America, 3 in Canada, and this is one of 3 remaining Quonset-style theaters in Canada. This place has incredible acoustics. You can whisper here and hear at the very back. It's echoey now because the fabric in the theater has been removed. The other unique thing about this, it also has the front is a brick facade, so it has the front is different from the rest of the theater.
They're quite popular in the United States. They're easy to erect. The reason why there isn't hardly any of them left, as easy as they were to build, they were really easy to tear down, right? And then sell the land. The land would probably become more valuable than the historic at the time.
Yeah, the Roxy Theatre is a pretty cool place. Well, we enjoyed lots of sunshine earlier today, but still fairly cool. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the mercury is going up by quite a bit over the next few days.
Well, you know, it's going to start climbing even as early as this evening. So by 7 p.m., we should be already up to the pluses, and it's going to remain there overnight. So by Tuesday morning, we're going to be seeing temperatures of 3, 4, and 5 degrees. So a nice day tomorrow. Also a little bit windier as well. Actually, I should say a lot more windy. We'll be seeing wind gusts up to 50 and 60 kilometers per hour on Tuesday. So I guess it's safe to say we'll be in a Chinook. Now, I will be back later in the show to give you that full 7-day forecast, and I'll give you a sneak peek. It's going to get cooler before it gets much warmer. I'll be back later.
Great, thanks so much. Syrian terrorists called HTS marched into wide government-controlled areas of northern Syria, capturing large parts of the country's largest city. It also took control of its international airport, along with dozens of nearby towns and villages. The Russian military carried out a series of airstrikes as the rebels advanced, taking control of Aleppo. Officials say 12 people were killed in the strike on a hospital in Aleppo, while a strike inside of the northwestern city of Idlib killed 8 civilians and injured more than 50 others. The Syrian government has lost control of Aleppo for the first time since the country's civil war began. The government of Canada has listed a Houthi militant group as a terrorist entity. The group is known as Ansar Allah. The designation allows for criminal penalties against any person or group that knowingly deals with this or any other listed entity. The move follows the steps of the United States as Canada has supported American and British strikes against Houthi targets earlier this year. The Houthis have launched a number of attacks on civilian and naval vessels in the Red Sea since November of 2023.
Since the early 2000s, Ansar Allah has waged an insurgency in Yemen, seeking to unseat the country's internationally recognized government. The group is also closely linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Quds Force and Hezbollah, 2 listed terrorist entities in Canada.
Canada's healthcare system continues to fall short with long wait times for vital testing and surgeries, along with consistent shortage of doctors. Now that's according to Bacchus Barua, the Director of Health Policy Studies at the Fraser Institute. He's also the co-author of a new study called Comparing Performance of Universal Healthcare Countries. The research showed that Canada had ranked 28 out of 30 for doctor availability.
it's not just physicians that we have a relative scarcity of. We also rank 25th out of 30 for hospital care beds that are dedicated to physical care, and we rank 27th for MRI machines, and we rank 28th for CT scanners. These are just a couple of examples, but I can say pretty confidently that across the board, we're definitely not getting actual physical resources and people for the money that we're spending. One thing becomes very clear, and that's that the stories that we hear about folks who can't get into hospital or hospitals that are overflowing, or folks who can't get a physician, start to make a lot more sense. Why? Well, we just don't have a lot of these resources, despite ranking as one of the highest spenders.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Bacchus Barua from the Fraser Institute and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our broadcast. According to a new report from the Alberta Notifiable Disease Summary, HIV rates in the province have increased substantially over the past few years. Research suggests the number of cases have doubled since 2019, from 257 HIV cases to 507 cases last year. Cases slowly trended upward from 2020 to 2022 and have experienced a sudden jump in the past year. Alberta Health says that around 278 infections in 2023 may have been acquired outside of the country. Now, a statement to BCN from the Office of Health Minister Adriana LaGrange says that so far this year, the number of cases is on track to resemble that of the 2023 numbers. Minister LaGrange also attributes factors that may have contributed to the rise of cases, including a substantial increase in our population, more effective contact tracing, and increased case testing throughout the province. Using scientifically unapproved substances to alleviate the symptoms of ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder seems to be on the rise. Mark Davids, manager of accessibility services with Lethbridge Polytechnic, explains how marijuana and other substances are being used by people who don't realize they have ADHD as a neurodevelopmental condition.
That self-medication thing is quite common as well, especially in people who don't know that they have ADHD. Alcohol use, stimulant use, marijuana use, those are all very common in people that have undiagnosed ADHD, because it's all about being able to slow your brain down and quiet down the thoughts so that you can focus and get tasks done. Or in the case of the stimulants, those are often mimicking the effects of medication that would be used to treat ADHD. And of course, they see a benefit from it, so that leads to more and more substance use.
According to recent research, the most common drug used by adults with ADHD outside of cannabis is cocaine, followed by opioids and amphetamines. The Lethbridge Hurricanes were involved in a blockbuster trade that took place on Monday. The Canes will receive the Moose Jaw Warriors captain Braden Yeager and all-star goaltender Jackson Unger. Now, in return, the Canes will send the Warriors forward Landon Ward, goalie Brady Smith, defenseman Cole Carter, and 6 draft picks, including 2 first-rounders. Yeager had a career season last year, posting 95 points in 57 games, and he led the Warriors to the WHL Championship in 2023. He was also named to Team Canada on Monday for the upcoming World Junior Hockey Championships, which begin on December the 26th. Canes general manager Peter Anholt says he's hoping that adding championship players will bring the team championship ambitions.
I think it's really, really important for the organization. I've been here 10 years. We've had some pretty good runs in the 10 years, and so we're probably due.
Obviously, it's just a shocker at the start, but, obviously looking at the group of guys and, kind of where this team's trending is, super exciting, and, get another chance to, go for the ad again. I think the biggest thing is, this team, as everybody can tell, they're going for a championship, and I want to bring whatever it takes to, get this team there.
Yeah, I think winning at 18 is not an easy feat as a goaltender, and I've got the experience now. I've got everything that I need to know. So I think coming into Lethbridge, it'll be good. It is exciting. It's I've never seen anything but Moose Jaw, but now that it's official, I'm excited to be here, and I think there's good things to come.
Now, Yeager and Unger will face their former team right away as the Canes face the Warriors Tuesday night right here in Lethbridge at 7 p.m. The charity check stop hosted by the Lethbridge Police Service was a huge success on Saturday. The LPS say thanks to the generosity of our community, a record-breaking 2,981 unwrapped gifts were collected. In addition, volunteers gathered 534 pounds of non-perishable food items and around $470 in donations. All have been given to the Christmas Hope campaign, which is working with 6 local charities to help those in need this holiday season. On December 3rd, the world will celebrate Giving Tuesday. It's a time to donate to great causes and help those most in need. It's also a great time to support local nonprofit groups which seek to raise awareness and fight the violence committed against women, youth, and children. The Stockings of Hope and YWCA Gala will raise awareness of these very serious issues. This last event will be held Tuesday at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center. Lorian Johansson, who's with the YWCA marketing and communications team, says through the gala, they're able to remind community members the importance of giving back.
And those two programs are the primary ways that we support and give back to our program participants during the holiday season. And it's always very gratifying to be able to make sure that a woman and her family have gifts for Christmas. And the gala is a glittering evening of fantastic fun and cocktails. And the Stockings of Hope will also be available for purchase and adoption at that gala event. I would really like to encourage members of the community to purchase a stocking, buy some gifts. If you prefer, you can make a financial donation and we will go and do the shopping. The support and the gifts and the financial contributions, they all stay in this community. New Stockings of Hope wish lists will be added to the website continually up to around the 15th of December. The last opportunity to drop off your items or your gifts will be the 20th of December.
In 2023, Stockings of Hope campaign supported 105 people throughout the YWCA programs. You know, no Christmas season is complete without getting into your car and touring some of the beautifully decorated houses here in our city. BCN's Naveen Day visited a decked-out house on the north side to chat with the owners about the display and the charitable causes they support.
Down through the chimney with good Saint Nick.
The Attridge family Christmas display opened for the holiday season for the third year in a row. Homeowner Gregory Attridge says the enjoyment he gets from watching the community enjoy the display makes it all worth it. And this year, he and his partner have made the display bigger and better.
I think we have 49 inflatables, probably close to pushing 1,000 lights. Next weekend we'll have our Christmas market. We have free hot chocolate, fire, movie.
Last year saw hundreds of attendees bring donations. They collected 450 pounds of food for the Interfaith Food Bank and carloads of toys for the Angel Tree Christmas campaign. This year, the display will continue supporting those initiatives, along with one more.
Prairie Pets, which is a dog and cat rescue, and so people can come and drop off new toys, treats, food for dogs in need.
Christmas light displays are not always appreciated by neighbors, given the extra lighting, noise, and traffic. However, unlike the Griswolds, Attridge says his display is being well received by his neighbors.
Most of the support from the neighbors has been pretty good, especially these ones. They let us use their electrical outside, so we don't have to overload ours, and some of the neighbors in the community actually donate money quite often.
The display runs December 7th, 14th, and 21st from 5:30 to 9 p.m. at 1803 14th Avenue North. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Very cool house, and it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. We still have a lot of snow here in Lethbridge, and it felt quite cool again today, but a warming trend, however, is on the way. Full weather details are coming up. We have been experiencing some light pillars recently in Lethbridge with our cooler weather. Now here's some video that one of our producer editors, Hayden, shot on Friday. Pretty amazing visuals. Look at how high and how bright they are. That is pretty incredible. Wow. Jeanette Roche is now not only to look at the forecast, but also to educate us on those light pillars. Jeanette, how are they actually created?
Right. So in a nutshell, they are caused by the interaction of light and ice crystals in the sky. So the ice crystals that are responsible for those light pillars tend to be flat, hexagonal shaped that are kind of sitting horizontally in the sky, and they act as a tiny mirror reflecting the light. So the light that you see tends to be elongated like a column, hence the light pillars that you're looking at there. So there you go, crash course in light pillars 101. Okay, as we get into the forecast, though, we are seeing some beautiful temperatures here. Tomorrow going to be 5 degrees and up to 60 kilometers per hour. So safe to say kind of more Chinook-like weather, and then falling down to -2 on Wednesday. And then we're going to climb right back up there again for Thursday and Friday. So 8 degrees Thursday, 9 on Friday. Same thing for Saturday, 9 degrees, and then down to 4 degrees on Sunday. So it should be a lovely week once we get past that -2 on Wednesday. Even -2 is nothing to sneeze at these days. Average high for this time of year, 1 degree. Average low, -11. 16 was our record high on this day. That happened back in 1963. And in 1919, Lethbridge saw the record low on this day, which was -33. Sun rose this morning at 8:09 and sunset this afternoon at 4:33, seeing 8 hours, 24 minutes of daylight today. Okay, on the west coast, Victoria seeing a lovely 8 degrees, mainly clear skies tomorrow, clear skies in Vancouver as well. Both of those cities also seeing foggy conditions, which will clear up by noon. 7 for the high there in Vancouver. Edmonton sitting at 6 tomorrow and 8 for the high in Calgary. Sun and cloud for both of those cities, as well as we look to Saskatchewan there. Saskatoon seeing a 60% chance of flurries, 1 for the high there, -1 in Regina, and make that a -6 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg could see some flurry activity as well. As we look to the central part of the country, Toronto seeing a high of 2 degrees, -4 for the high in Ottawa, and -3 in Montreal. Montreal looking at a 40% chance of flurries there. As we see Atlantic Canada here, Fredericton, mix of sun and cloud, -2 for the high, 1 for the high in Halifax. Charlottetown seeing 2 centimeters of snow in the afternoon after a 30% chance of flurries in the morning there, 1 for the high, and expected 1 tomorrow in St. John's with a mix of sun and cloud. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Consumers across North America are scouring the internet for online deals as they look to make the most of the post-Thanksgiving shopping marathon on Cyber Monday. Even though e-commerce is now part of many people's routine, Cyber Monday continues to be the biggest online shopping day of the year thanks to steady discounts. Many retailers began their Cyber Monday promotions over the weekend. Consumer spending for the online shopping days between U.S. Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday provides an indication of how much shoppers are willing to spend for the Christmas holiday season. The world's 4th largest automaker is looking for a new chief executive. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares has resigned immediately as the company struggles with slumping sales. Tavares held the top spot at the Jeep and Ram maker for 4 years, and the company says the process to appoint a new permanent CEO is well underway now. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 57 points on the day to finish at 25,590. The Dow was down 128 points to 44,782. The S&P 500 was up 14 on the day to 6,047, and the Nasdaq was up 185 points to 19,403. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 10 cents to 68.10 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 12 cents to 3.21 U.S. Gold was down 19.07 on the day to 26.3872 U.S. an ounce, and silver was down 11 cents to $30.50 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.32 per bushel, barley's at $6.53, canola's at $13.08, and corn is at $7.59 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.13 to $187.35. Feeder cattle January contract was down $2.63 to $256.85, and lean hogs were up $1.15 to $83.23. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 71.20 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government says it is eliminating the photo radar cash cow. Officials say photo radar will be taken down in areas that specifically generate revenue and do not offer traffic safety benefits. Transport Minister Devin Derishan says as of April 1st of next year, ticketing on numbered provincial highways will end as photo radar will be restricted to school, playground, and construction zones. When it comes to healthcare, where does Canada really stack up compared with other countries? Bacchus Barua, Director of Health Policy of the Fraser Institute, will give us his thoughts and stats momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Canadian Canadians continue to be frustrated with our healthcare system, long wait times and a shortage of doctors. So joining us to discuss this and more is Bacchus Barua, the Director of Health Policy Studies at the Fraser Institute and co-author of a new study called Comparing Performance of Universal Healthcare Countries 2024. Welcome back, Bacchus. Good to have you with us again.
Thank you so much for having me on the show again.
Okay, well, this is always an interesting topic, one that gets people's buttons kind of pushed. So maybe, can you briefly explain how the study was done and what kind of indicators were used to compare healthcare?
Sure. I think most Canadians will know that it's very obvious when they look around them that the healthcare system is crumbling and struggling. But it's really important for us to be objective and have a look at how our healthcare system is doing yearly and then also across different countries. So one of the things that we've done every year, at least for the last 10 years, is we look at Canada compared to other countries with universal healthcare and have high incomes, basically trying to get an apples to apples comparison. And I think for some people, it might actually be quite surprising that there are other countries with universal healthcare. We're kind of sold this idea that Canada is unique because we have universal healthcare, but really we're unique more so because of the way that we do universal healthcare. If we look at other countries around the world, there are at least 30 other countries that have universal health insurance coverage. So that's a total set of 31 countries. And we are looking at over 40 different indicators of performance across 4 different areas of measurement. One of them is the availability of resources. We're looking at the utilization of volume of services. We're looking at timely access to care. And we're looking at clinical performance and outcomes. And we're contrasting all of it with the amounts that we're actually spending on healthcare. The general idea is, what are we actually putting into the system? And what do we actually get out of it? We should be seeing this money at least in one of these areas. But, as we'll talk about a little bit more, we're really not seeing it translate into performance.
Right. Okay, that's a good indicator, the money. So how much money does Canada spend on healthcare compared to other countries?
So there are a couple of different ways to slice it. When we look at data from 2022, which is the most recent that we can do across all these different countries, we're spending about 11.5% of our GDP on an age-adjusted basis, which is important for us to do because different countries have different age profiles. And that ranks us at 4th highest out of these 31 countries with universal healthcare. Another way to look at it is per capita. And in terms of per capita, we're about 9th highest. And so the way that I kind of try to think about it is that whichever way you look at it, adjusted, unadjusted, per capita as a percent of GDP, we're amongst the top third spenders, regardless of which way you look at it. And that's not necessarily a problem if A, your books are balanced, and if B, you're getting good value in return. But again, unfortunately, what we are consistently finding is that that high spending is not necessarily translating into high performance.
Right. And with that amount of spending, you would expect good results. But your study is showing that Canada ranked 28th out of 30 for the availability of doctors. That's pretty disappointing. So what are some of the reasons behind the poor showing? Why don't we have more physicians? What's going on?
So this is a key area of performance that we've looked at, which is the availability of resources. And while absolutely we are ranked 28 out of 30 with physicians, it's not just physicians that we have a relative scarcity of. We also rank 25th out of 30 for hospital care beds that are dedicated to physical care. And we rank 27th for MRI machines, and we rank 28th for CT scanners. These are just a couple of examples, but I can say pretty confidently that across the board, we're definitely not getting actual physical resources and people for the money that we're spending. When it comes to volume of services, I would say that the excellent folks in our healthcare system do seem to be trying to do the best that they can with these few resources. So our volume indicators are a bit of a mixed bag. But overall, with these low resources, one thing becomes very clear, and that's that the stories that we hear about folks who can't get into hospital or hospitals that are overflowing, or folks who can't get a physician, start to make a lot more sense. Why? Well, we just don't have a lot of these resources, despite ranking as one of the highest spenders. The question of why would come back to how we actually structure our healthcare system.
Wow. And, of course, without enough doctors, that obviously impacts the wait times for patients. And I understand we ranked, second worst for patients who waited more than a month to see a specialist, and the worst for patients who waited 2 months or more for non-emergency surgery. And I need to think another poor ranking was the 25th out of 30 for hospital beds and also 25th for psychiatric beds. So if we're one of the biggest spenders, why don't we have more hospital beds?
Well, I think you brought up a really important point, which is these fewer resources do have consequences, and one of them is absolutely the long wait times that we see. And to get to the answer, which I know we're trying to get to about why this is happening and who's doing better, one of the things we can do is actually we can look at some of the countries that are doing better than us. So when we talk about wait times, for example, whereas 65% of Canadians had to wait more than a month to see a specialist, it was only 36% in Switzerland and 36% in the Netherlands. And it was actually much lower in 2021 before 2020 and 2021 before we had to deal with the pandemic. Same thing when it comes to surgical care, whereas 58% of Canadians had to wait over 2 months for surgical care. In Germany, it was up about 1/3 of that. It was about 20%. In the Netherlands, it was also about 20%. And it becomes even more stark when you look at wait times across a year, for example. But this is starting to give us a set of countries that you can already see over here. And honestly, if you look at all the indicators, it's about the same set of countries that do better than us. These are countries like Switzerland, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Australia, and to an extent even Sweden and France. Sorry, I mentioned France already. But the thing is, there are 3 things that these countries do differently.
Okay.
The first is that they have a different attitude towards the private sector. And yes, I know that's a difficult thing to talk about in Canada, but despite having a universal healthcare system, these countries see the private sector as a part of the universal healthcare system, helping to expand supply dynamically in order to actually deliver on that universal healthcare promise. The second thing that they do differently is that they generally tend to expect patients to share in the cost of treatment. Now, this is very different than taxes or premiums, but they expect sharing through like deductibles and co-insurance payments. Let's say, for example, in the Netherlands, it's about a $300 deductible. So you first pay, €300 deductible. Okay. You first pay the first €300 and then insurance kicks in.
Oh, like it's
in Switzerland, they have. Yeah, exactly. And in Switzerland, they have like a 10% addition to that. So it says, okay, whatever you're getting, you pay 10% of that cost. But there are, of course, exemptions for vulnerable populations, pregnant mothers, folks who are chronically ill, and there are limits so that it's never crossing a certain percentage of income. It's not meant to be a financial burden, but it's providing an important signal, which is saying that these are scarce resources that need to be used responsibly, and we need to temper demand a little bit over there. And the third thing that they do differently is that they fund their hospitals according to activity. In Canada, we are stuck with this old and outdated approach of global budgets, and that's because we have a government-heavy healthcare system. But what that does is it makes hospitals see patients as a cost, because every time a patient comes into the hospital, they're eating into that budget. Most of these other countries have realized that the way that you want to do it is you want to fund their hospitals according to activity, so that every time a patient comes in, the hospital actually gets money to treat that patient. So these are 3 sort of big idea things that these countries do differently. Of course, there's a whole lot of details, but this is really what sets us apart from a lot of the high performers.
Yeah, so we see what these other countries are doing that's better than Canada. It sounds like Canada has a lot to learn from them. In your knowledge and research, is Canada actually spending time learning from these countries on how to improve things?
There have been some small experiments in provinces. One great example was Saskatchewan in about 2010 to 2014. They tried to do what they can within the confines of what the federal government allows them to do. They partnered with third-party private clinics to expand supply. They had a central pool of patient referrals so that your GP doesn't just refer you to the specialist that they know, but you go to a central pool and you're matched with the physician with the shortest wait time. And Saskatchewan saw their wait times decrease dramatically. They went from the second highest wait times to the second lowest, shortest wait times within 4 or 5 years. But there's an important caveat. Over time, their wait times started to creep back up again. And this is the entire problem. The issue is that those sorts of things are good, but they're a first step. And they're really just all that they can do within the confines of the federal Canada Health Act, which is, it's a financial tool that dictates transfers to the provinces. But the thing is, there are a lot of restrictions in Canada about going beyond that. But I will say this, there's a lot that provinces can do and that I think they can experiment with and should. And on top of that, there's a lot that the federal government can do to loosen the hold that it has on dictating what provinces can and cannot do by learning the lessons from these other countries.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think that we're spending too much on healthcare bureaucracy and management?
So I haven't done research on that in particular. There have been, I think, folks, particularly, for example, Dr. Rande, who's found data in British Columbia that shows that the management has expanded over time. But I think a comprehensive measurement of what's actually going on is unfortunately very difficult for us to tell, because some of it is coupled into the hospital spending data in Canada rather than pushed into the administrative section. But what I will say is that there must be something going on, because clearly our spending is not translating directly into the resources and into the volume of services, and certainly not the timely access to care. So there is something gumming up the works that's not resulting in the money translating to performance.
Yeah, and Bacchus, you mentioned one of the things that those countries are doing well, or they're doing differently, I should say, is privatization. And in Canada, we have a lot of resistance to the idea of expanding private healthcare options, and along with that, competition between hospitals and doctors. So are we seeing more of that in nations with the top performance ratings? I mean, that's one of the things for sure.
I think one of the real unfortunate things that's been going on a lot in North America is that Canada, a lot of our healthcare discussions are focused on the United States, and in the United States, they're focused on Canada. And I likened this to, going to the races and betting on two horses that are not really doing well. Really what you want to do is you want to focus on the horses that are winning the race. And it becomes very, very clear. As I mentioned, Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, so on and so forth. And all of them just have a different approach. Rather than saying that our system must be public and that, we must preserve it as such and have that as a priority, they put the patients as a priority. And you design the system around the patients and say, okay, if we have a universal system, what we want to focus on is actual delivery of services so that we get that universal promise. So put the patient first, adjust the system around it. In Canada, we're just so focused on the opposite, which is the preservation of the system at the cost of the patient. And very clearly, patients are paying the price for that decision.
Oh, that's such a shame. We all, of course, want to see healthcare improve for us and our loved ones here in Canada. So where do you see things going in Canada over the next decade?
It's, I would say, quite disappointing to see how little provincial premiers and certainly federal governments have acted upon this. And I think there's a real lack of courage or lack of understanding. I don't know what's going on there. But I will say this, that I have a lot of hope and optimism for the average Canadian. I do believe that the average Canadian is understanding that there are other countries, and it's not just a question of Canada versus the United States of universal healthcare or not. There are other countries within this universal umbrella of healthcare that are doing a better job on delivering on that promise. We are much more aware of information out there, sometimes to do with the reports that we're doing, but also just because of that availability of information that's out there. And I do believe, and poll after poll is suggesting, that Canadians do understand that our healthcare system is in trouble and reforms are needed. What those reforms are going to look like, we will have to see. I hope it's an iterative process and that we do understand, because I think everybody really is fundamentally on the same page, and that's about improving our healthcare system. And like always, I think it will be led by the average Canadian, and politicians will at some point have to figure out that's where the data is indicating we need to go.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a lot about how these other countries are sort of operating. What about from the patient standpoint? How do we compare with health outcomes for Canadian patients compared to those other countries? And also with overall life expectancy compared to these other nations?
So we look at it, and we look at it in clinical performance, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. And why I say clinical performance is because when we just look at things like health status, things can get very fuzzy very quickly, because health status can be affected by a variety of different things, including genetic factors, gun violence, all sorts of things like that. When you look at clinical performance, it says, okay, if somebody has been diagnosed with, let's say, asthma what are the survival rates 30 days after that diagnosis or a year after that diagnosis? And in Canada, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Or at least 10 years ago, because that data has not been updated, and that makes me a little bit nervous, we actually did quite well in terms of cancer survival rates, for example. We're closer to the top when it comes to 5-year survival rates for breast cancers and rectal cancers and things like that. But through that time, before and today, we still have very poor outcomes for things like obstetric trauma, or we have average outcomes for things like survival rates after having an ischemic stroke. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And the way that I put it is that I think the folks in the healthcare system are trying to do the absolute best that they can with the resources, with the scarce resources that they have, but we shouldn't be putting them in that position. And the second thing is that while obviously we're trying to triage patients as best as we can, particularly these patients who need the most care, everybody else just seems to be getting swept under the rug. Folks who say, need a hip replacement or a knee replacement, which may not be as intense and urgent as let's say cardiac care. It's not like they have to wait just a couple more months or just a couple of weeks. They have to sometimes wait years in order to get treatment. So that's what concerns me over there. We're trying to do the best that we can with the resources that we have, but really what we need those resources so that we aren't having to make such difficult decisions and such drastic decisions in order to prioritize patients, and that all patients can actually get the care that they need.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Bacchus. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Bacchus Barua is the Director of Health Policy Studies at the Fraser Institute and co-author of a new study comparing performance of universal health care countries 2024. You can read the entire study at fraserinstitute.org.
Many of us know people who adhere to a vegan diet for one reason or another. Is it actually a healthier way to go, or does it have some drawbacks? Today's guest is going to chat with us about that. Jillian Hallworth, she is the chair of exercise science who also specializes in biology and nutrition at Lethbridge Polytechnic. Jillian, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you with us. Can you first of all tell us a little bit about the kind of programs that you're teaching at Lethbridge Polytechnic?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm the chair of the exercise science program currently, but teach mostly in human nutrition, anatomy and physiology, and various health and wellness courses at the Polytechnic.
And can you explain specifically what a vegan diet is? Because before we started recording, you said that there's different levels or there's certain things that some vegans may eat and while others may avoid.
Yeah, exactly. So a vegan diet in itself excludes all animal products. There's no fish, no meat, no dairy, eggs, or honey, and it's strictly plant-based. So the folks who adhere to a vegan diet are consuming things like fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds exclusively.
What about vegans that are okay with eating things like eggs and dairy, though?
Yeah, so there is a varying degree of a plant-based diet. Again, a strict vegan would avoid all animal products, and that includes dairy, eggs, and sometimes processed foods that contain animal derivatives. Things like, before we started recording, mentioned gummy bears or Jell-O that may be made with gelatin. On the other hand, some people identify more as plant-based, so they still occasionally consume dairy and eggs and have some type of dietary flexibility. So they would fall under maybe the vegetarian camp, and you can get more specific into, say, an ovo-lacto vegetarian who would consume eggs and dairy.
Okay, and how popular is going vegan? Do you have any stats or idea on the percentage of Canadian vegans?
Yeah, as you might imagine, that's kind of hard to find specific, statistics on as dietary preferences kind of change with trends. But overall, we see that veganism has gained popularity globally, and that includes Canada, where plant-based eating just generally is on the rise. And some of the online searches for plant-based products or vegan-related topics has increased by, shows about 113% since 2016. According to a London Free Press study that was based off of some Google Trends. But Like I mentioned, as you might kind of expect, some of these trends do follow popular media, social media. And so it's hard to say exactly how many Canadians follow a vegan diet. But there was a Statista survey in 2018 that showed roughly about 850,000 Canadians are vegan, with 2.3 million vegetarian, and many people indicating that they're considering reducing their meat consumption.
What are the factors that are increasing this popularity? You mentioned some media influence. Is it other factors as well that are kind of pushing people to go more vegan? Like, are they wanting to just eat healthier, or is it do they want to become vegan to maybe like help reduce their carbon footprint, or do something for climate change?
Yeah, the top reasons that people tend to report for going vegan are animal welfare and environmental.
And what are some of the health benefits from a vegan diet?
Research that's linked to a vegan diet shows that the diet could lower risk for certain chronic conditions like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and certain types of cancers. And it's typically because the diet is generally higher in fiber, lower in saturated fats, and that can improve cholesterol levels and generally support cardiovascular health.
And growing up, we've been taught that everything in moderation is okay, but what are some of the potential problems we can experience when we leave out entire food groups like meats and dairy?
Yeah, cutting out entire food groups, again, like meat and dairy, could introduce a person to susceptibility for certain nutrient deficiencies. And that's particularly for nutrients like iron, vitamin B12, calcium, and omega-3 fatty acids. It's really important if a person is making any type of elimination to their diet, be it for environmental or animal rights reasons, that they're carefully planning their diet to ensure that they're getting the balanced and adequate nutrients that they need.
And prior to our interview, we were talking a little bit about you can't trust everything that you read on social media. One thing that's out there is that soy is often part of the vegan diet and can even act as a substitute for many ingredients that are outside of the vegan diet. However, there's numerous articles that you can read on various social media sites that suggest soy can potentially negatively affect men by lowering testosterone and raising estrogen levels. But other experts call that a myth. What are your thoughts?
That's a pretty loaded question. That's a big
I thought it was
debate.
being balanced there.
Well, like you mentioned, as everything with nutrition, there's opinions on both sides, right? In terms of soy, it is an incredibly well-balanced plant-based protein. It has all of the amino acids that a person needs. And so my opinion would be tofu or other soy products, things like tempeh, they're a great substitute for proteins that could otherwise be missing in the diet. In terms of some of the things that we feed ourselves, soy would not be on the top list of my concerns.
I see. And what types of foods do vegans usually substitute for the missing proteins? We've talked about soy, and which also like tofu, which is soy-based.
Yeah, so vegans can get protein from a number of different foods: beans, lentils, tofu, tempeh, a product called seitan, quinoa, chickpeas, any of your pulses. And those plant-based proteins can quite easily meet the daily requirements when consumed in adequate amounts and ensuring that there's variety.
Now, you mentioned one ingredient there, seitan. I've never heard of that. What is it?
It's from my understanding, a wheat product. It's derived from wheat.
Interesting. I've never heard of that. I've heard all the others, like the quinoa and all the pulses, and but yeah, that one caught me off guard because I never heard that one before.
That's fair.
Now, I often hear that supplements are necessary with a vegan diet to ensure calcium, minerals, and vitamins are kept at the proper levels. Are there any recommendations of what vegans should be taking just to make sure that they are balanced with all the nutrients that their body needs?
Yeah, so since some of the nutrients that we mentioned before, things like vitamin B12, omega-3s, iron, and calcium could be harder to obtain solely from plants, certain folks, those who follow a vegan diet, say, for example, might benefit from supplements or fortified foods. And of course, as with any nutrient replacement or any supplementation, it's important that a person's consulting with their healthcare provider in order to ensure what supplements they need, what's necessary for them.
Now, when it comes to a vegan diet, should we be concerned about the overall costs? Is it more or less expensive? Because it seems like when you go to the supermarket, all of the whole foods, the raw foods, they tend to be there tends to be more volatility with the pricing, and because I've noticed my grocery bill has gone up quite a lot over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think we've all probably noticed that, right? Groceries have gotten more expensive over the past couple of years, regardless of what diet you're consuming. And a vegan diet can vary in its cost. Whole plant foods, things like grains and beans, are often quite affordable. They can be dried, they can be canned, and that's typically a quite cost-effective way of getting a nice variety of nutrients. If you're able to eat in-season vegetables or frozen vegetables, that's another great way to make a vegan diet more cost-effective. But when you start to get into those specialty vegan products, things like plant-based meats or dairy alternatives, that certainly starts to add up. And maybe directing the budget around whole foods rather than some of those processed vegan alternatives could help a person looking to keep their costs low.
I remember growing up, my mom would always insist that we eat a vegetarian lunch and save the meat for supper. And she was always saying, like she would, growing up in an Indian family, my mom would often cook dal and rice for lunch, which is like lentils, and she was saying how affordable it was. And so even when I get a little homesick or I miss my parents, I'll cook dal and rice just as a little bit of a comfort food. Very affordable, actually.
Well, and a great option, going back to the protein conversation that we had, right? Saying like, is soy a good option? I mentioned that it's considered a complete protein. It has all of the amino acids that you need. Eating something like dal, which has your lentils and your rice, makes sure that you're getting that complete amino acid complement. Rice is missing one of the essential amino acids. Lentils are missing the other, or another, not the other, but another essential amino acid. And so when you pair those two incomplete proteins together, you get all of the essential amino acids that you need. So it's a fabulous pairing.
Will a vegan diet help lose weight? And if so, why and how?
Some people do lose weight on a vegan diet, often because it's lower in calories and it's higher in fiber, which can promote fullness, make a person feel more satiated in between meals. And so a well-balanced vegan diet could aid in weight management. But like any weight loss, it really comes into energy balance. Are you consuming less energy than you're expending? If so, weight loss is more likely. So it really depends. Again, folks who maybe rely more heavily on some of those processed or ultra processed vegan foods might find it a little bit more challenging for weight management if, again, energy balance is in a surplus.
How difficult is it to stick to a vegan diet if you're on the road a lot or you travel for work and maybe you have to eat in restaurants more often?
Yeah, sticking to a vegan diet on the road can be challenging, but more and more restaurants now are offering vegan-friendly options, or they might indicate on the menu with a V or a leaf or something, menu option, that it's a vegan-friendly or a plant-based option. Some places might require a bit of flexibility or creativity. Some folks might find it easier to order sides or ask to modify menu items. I always say it's a good idea to pull up the menu online first if you can to see what your options are. Most establishments have their menus posted online and have allergen menus that complement that, so you can make the choices that suit your lifestyle.
And generally, sticking to a new diet or a healthier diet can be challenging no matter what type of diet it is, especially like if you're accustomed to eating a certain type of food. For me, driving past those golden arches, I'd want to sink my teeth into a Big Mac, or craving that steak when maybe I shouldn't be eating it like every week, but as a treat. So, what advice can you give to those that want to get onto a vegan diet, but maybe don't have as much willpower as they need?
Willpower and moderation are two words that have come up here that are challenging for folks, right? I think it all comes down to your why. If you're deciding to consume a plant-based diet just because it's the trendy thing to do, it's probably going to be harder to adhere to. So figuring out some type of reason or some type of motivation that aligns with your values and your beliefs is going to make those decisions just a little bit easier.
And if you're going to try a vegan diet, what should you do? Should you just jump all in, or is it better just to ease into it bit by bit?
Transitioning gradually allows time for your gastrointestinal system to adjust. Like we've mentioned before, there's a lot of fiber in a vegan diet if you are sort of relying more so on those whole plant foods, beans, your vegetables. And so easing into that can make that transition a little bit more comfortable on your gastrointestinal system, and can also make the diet easier to maintain long term. Going all in, of course, is an option, but it can take some extra planning in order to avoid those nutrient gaps and even food fatigue, getting tired of the same things if you're consuming those over and over again. I'd say easy.
And a lot of these ingredients that we talked about, these are high fiber ingredients that could potentially be really beneficial for those with diabetes. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so fiber helps to slow the blood sugar response. So when you're eating a meal that has a good amount of fiber and also has protein, instead of seeing your blood sugar levels spike and then really quickly drop, that fiber helps to slow the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. And so it is quite beneficial for folks who struggle or are impacted by diabetes, but also folks who aren't, for regulating the blood sugar levels following a meal.
Jillian Hallworth is the chair of exercise science, specializing in biology and nutrition at Lethbridge Polytechnic. Jillian, thanks so much for sharing all that information with us today.
Jeff, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.